Hello everyone and welcome to the 9th and to the very last episode of the European Dialogue for Sustainable Cities. My name is Saara Vauramo and I'm hosting you today with Jussi Knuuttila. In the Dialogue series, we highlight solutions that other cities could use in their daily development. In every episode, we also had guests from previous European Green Capital cities. Today, we're happy to have Hamburg with us, which used to be the European Green Capital in 2011.
And hello everyone, my name is Jussi Knuuttila and I'm your second host tonight. And as always, you can participate in the discussion, you can ask questions to our panelists by writing in the chat on YouTube, so please do that. So let's start the show and our viewers tell us where you are joining from, so write your answer in the chat.
Great, let's see after a while where we got the audience today.
Yes.
We're having again super exciting panel discussion ahead of us. Our first guest is Tobias Goevert. Tobias is currently the Assistant Director of Regional and Urban Development, responsible for strategic planning and urban design in the Ministry of Urban Development and Housing at the city of Hamburg. Tobias has studied architecture and urban design in Germany and England, and he has 20 years of experience working in the development industry of London. Great to have you on board, Tobias.
And welcome, Tobias. And our second guest today is Tim Gill. Tim is a global advocate for children's outdoor play and mobility and an independent researcher, writer and consultant based in London. Tim is the author of Urban Playground, How Child-Friendly Planning and Design Can Save Cities, and the book No Fear, Growing Up in a Risk-Averse Society. Tim is a Design Council Ambassador and Churchill Fellow and former director of the Children's Play Council, now called Play England. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Glad to have you.
Great to have you. Our third guest is Eira Rosberg-Airaksinen. Eira Rosberg is a licentiate of philosophy in regional sciences, and she works as leading specialist in Häme Centre of Economic Development, Transport and Environment. The Eira Centre is the state of regional office. Her work fields are climate change mitigation and adaptation, and also circular economy across all the organization and its tasks. Sustainable land use is one of those works that she works. So great to have you here in the show, Eira.
Thank you, great to be here.
And our final guest today is Johanna Sääksniemi. Johanna works as a master plan architect here in Lahti. Lahti is building a sustainable future together in a process that is called Lahti Direction. The Lahti Direction work, it starts from city strategy and is done in cycles of 4 years by the city council terms. Welcome to the show, Johanna.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And we've got some comments also from the YouTube chat, but you are still welcoming to say greetings where you are joining from. But at least we got several people joining from Finland. That's great. So the theme of this last episode is sustainable land use. Land under our feet is valuable, but also a finite resource. Jussi, did you know that globally Europe land is actually one of the most intensively used?
Didn't know that.
Yeah, me neither actually previously. According to the European Environmental Agency, approximately 80% of the Europe's surface area is shaped by land use. As we need to use more land for getting more space, at the same time we need to do it also sustainably and make sure to protect our ecosystems and the services that they provide. Sustainable land use has also an important role in climate change mitigation and adaptation work.
Conflicts between needs for the natural environment and the settlement and infrastructure must be taken into account in long-term decision-making processes. Decisions that are related to land use planning and management are often made at a local level. Still, the European Commission controls land use planning and development in the EU countries. And to show our viewers what sustainable land use really is, we would like to ask our panelists, could you give us an example of a project or initiative related to sustainable land use in your own cities? And maybe we could start with Hamburg. Tobias.
Yeah, and like you say, we have the same issues, I think, in most historic modern European cities, is that we are running out of space in terms of densification, and we have to look very carefully at the sites that we use. I would like today, I will just quickly introduce one of our initiatives. So rather than talking about individual sites, we have a program that we call our Magistralen development, which is our a selection of 12 large roads that take a lot of traffic, but they're also subject to mobility change, and they are sort of the veins of the city where you experience Hamburg when you arrive from the hinterland, and they are not always the most welcoming places, as you all know, these 70s, 60s infrastructure monsters, but they do have a very important vital function. So for us, as we're running out of a space on just brownfield site conversion, we're looking at these major roads and how to interlink mobility, climate change, and densification and good town planning into master planning along these corridors, along with our local districts. So we're working on different levels on the master plan for these particular trunk roads. I think that's quite unique. It's a very difficult topic, but I think it will give us a really interesting take on how to develop the city in the future as mobility changes, but also in terms of repairing some of the damage that has been done through town planning post-war. Thanks.
Thank you, Tobias. And then Tim, would you be next?
Thank you. So I'm going to share a slide, which is an image of, it's not the city that I live in, it's the city of Freiburg. I hope you can see that. Mm-hmm. Can you see that? And you can see 4 pictures, and this is Vauban. And I guess some of the audience will know Vauban. It's an eco-suburb on the edge of Freiburg city. It's 5,000 or 6,000 people, and I think it's a really good model of a child-friendly district. And the key thing that you need to realize about Vauban, which is medium density, you can see mixed use, but crucially it is almost completely car-free. There's very low levels of car ownership, and if you do own a car, you have to park it in one of 3 car parks around the edge of the district. So that means that the whole of the space between the buildings is available for play, for walking and cycling, for greenery, for recreation and leisure. And so I've been lucky enough to visit Freiburg twice over the years and to spend time in Vauban. And it's amazing to see the numbers of children, different ages, with and without their parents, spending time in the space and getting around the district. So it's like the children in this district are, they're an indicator species for cities, in the same way that if you see salmon swimming in a river, that's a sign of the health of that habitat. For me, if you see children, like you do in Vauban, active and visible in the public space of the district, then that's a sign of the health of that habitat.
Very beautiful image.
That's excellent. Let's book a trip to Freiburg. Thanks, Tim. And Eira, floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I have also one slide. In our ELY Centre, we have a Metso program, and that means an old forest program of protection of old forests. Also, well, that means we have funds to buy old forests from, for example, private landowners. We also have a same kind of program for buying biodiverse peat bogs from private or municipal landowners and to protect them. And we have target of 400 hectares of these old forests per year and 200 hectares peat bogs every year for protection. In addition to that, we have climate targets for the region. And there you can see we have mapped our region's carbon storages in soil and also mapped as a geographical information, which is then can be used in geographical information systems, the carbon sinks in vegetation. So that would be my examples. We are acting as a regional level, and we are trying to enhance the sustainable land use, but also protection of the biodiversity.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eira. And then Johanna, your turn.
Yeah, thank you. I will also share one image for you. Just a second. Okay, now you probably can see it. I want to share with you a very new experiment relating to sustainable land use in Lahti. We have been recently testing how compensation of ordinary nature can be conducted in cities' land use. This Ecoteko pilot project was accomplished in collaboration with University of Helsinki and Finnish Environment Institute. The aim of the project was to develop a model for the municipality to compensate for its disturbance of nature. In this project, we compensated the local damage caused by planning and constructing a new residential area by conserving nature and enhancing biodiversity elsewhere. Possible compensation methods were restoration or conservation of similar habitat types. Here I must underline that ecological compensation can be considered as a final step of the mitigation hierarchy when damage cannot be avoided. In Lahti, we believe that might be something what always have to be done in the future to reduce and prevent the loss of nature that will inevitably occur due to construction, opening the roads, and other nature-altering activities.
Thank you. Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you to all of the panelists for these examples.
So as we heard, actually the sustainable land use can mean quite different things.
Yeah, exactly.
So what comes to your mind, our viewers, when thinking about sustainable land use? How would you describe it? What kind of terms would you use? You can also answer that using the YouTube chat.
Okay, and then let's continue our chat with the panelists. And Tobias, you work with strategic planning and urban design in the city of Hamburg. The city has the population over 1.84 million people. Hamburg is the second biggest city after the capital, Berlin. And the population is going to keep on growing at least until 2030. And of course, Hamburg is also very famous for its maritime history and its waterside location. So, Tobias, I think you already scratched the surface, but could you tell us what are the main challenges when it comes to sustainable land use in the city?
Yeah, I'd be pleased to. I think we face multiple challenges. Partly, as you mentioned, we're very happy to have a city that is growing, but we wanted to remain a fair city. We wanted to be affordable for everyone. We wanted to retain its impressive green credentials. Hamburg's, like you said, been for quite a while at the forefront of showing how sustainable development can work. And as I said before briefly, we are not running out of space tomorrow, but we are a growing city under pressure, which then can have multiple implications for land prices, and land availability is such that we're very fortunate to, as opposed to other cities, own a lot of land ourselves and have our own housing company, which makes us a very large landlord in amongst other private sector competitors. So we are able to make use of our own land, and the challenge is, of course, to make use of it well and not to build at low densities and then end up running out of space. So we have a policy that we call Hamburg Maß, which is looking at densification of districts rather than individual plots. We calculate densities around quarters, Quartiere as we call them. So we look at the community itself and how densification can relate to that. We are not a very tall city. We don't build very many tall buildings. We work in the kind of European urban context of blocks. Often 5 or 6 stories is already pretty dense. We're not one of the densest cities in comparison to places like Paris or London, but what we do have is we're a city-state, and that means we have, within the confines that we're in, pretty good control over our planning strategy and what we implement. So it's a bit like New York being surrounded by water, Hamburg's been surrounded by a political boundary. Therefore, we go within that, and we look very carefully at our sites. So we try to face, in terms of the challenge of developing, keeping the prices low, having a sustainable policy. We've been looking at this 10,000 homes a year consented and built rule for over 10 years. We've been managing to stick to that, and that has allowed us to keep prices low. We're also looking at a 3/3 mix between rented, social, and private for sale, which also has proven very well to give us sustainable supply. But we're also, in terms of climate change, very proud of our open and green spaces, and we don't want to build on, and we have indeed put a contract in place to not build on any of the public land, on any of the parks within a certain strategic confine. That's our Vertrag for Hamburg. So there, the challenges around these land uses continue, and as we move into a phase where we have sort of secured some of the brownfield sites relating to post-industrial lands, or land being in a way not used as much for industrial use, we face the challenge of regenerating that land in a good way, and also to bring it into use for mixed use in the right places with the right public transport connectivity. So one of the other factors and the challenges is to get people to these bits of land. There's no point in developing your port area if you don't have the public transport to get there. So that's why we're building a whole new subway, building and rebuilding bridges, railway bridges, and all that costs, of course, a lot of money. We also try to be proactive about buying land from the private sector if we can afford it. It does work here and there, in order to just make sure we have more control. So it's a constant give and take between control, the city actually actively engaging in the land and property market through our various companies that we have set up to develop. For example, the Hafen City, which some of you will have visited and seen, which was in a way the beginning of looking at brownfield sites. But as we grow up and we move on. We have to look more carefully at densification within urban quarters, replacing, if we can not avoid it, replacing lower density structures, but also looking very carefully at any open space. Is it well used? Is it used for open space climate? Can it be brought into better use, and always in exchange creates new parks to go alongside these quarters. So mehr Stadt in der Stadt is our word for intensifying within the urban areas. That's what we're really trying to be about.
Thank you.
Perhaps at the start.
Well, that's a very thorough question. I think you already answered all my follow-up questions. And yeah, it was really interesting to hear about the densification without taking space from green spaces. So yeah, that's something I always think when cities densify, at what cost. So this was very, very good message, Tobias. We will get back to these topics maybe later in the discussion. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's get back to Hamburg as well. Tim, we were just discussing about Hamburg shortly. We didn't really touch that much about citizen participation yet. So what kind of ideas came to you when listening about the Hamburg case?
Right. Well, I want to pick up on the question of density, actually. I think maybe many people in the audience think it's not so great to bring up a family or to be a child in a more dense neighborhood. But actually, if we ask children themselves, if we get their views on what they like and what they don't like about their neighborhoods, the two things that come out all the time. First, they like choice and variety. They like a range of things to do and places to go where they can meet and play and enjoy what the neighborhood has. And the second aspect is they like to be able to get around. It's that their mobility is crucial. And of course, with children, that means walking and cycling. And so there you can see how a compact and lively neighborhood is a good place for children. That's one of the reasons I like to showcase Vauban in Freiburg, and I'm sure that you can see the connections with the conversation we just had about Hamburg. But I just want to say that this notion of children's everyday freedoms, that this is what makes a place child-friendly, this actually comes from the work of the Finnish academic. So Marketa Kitter, who is the professor of spatial planning in Aalto University in Helsinki, her idea of the importance of mobility and also choice runs right through my work. And I think it's a key insight to realizing how you can link children's views with making cities more sustainable and greener.
Great that you actually make a link to Marketa Kytter's work, because there's also an interlink with Lahti's master planning work. Let's get back to that later on. But Tim, you have worked as an independent scholar and writer on childhood and children's play and mobility. This year you published a book called Urban Playground: How Child-Friendly Planning and Design Can Save Cities. Could you share still some practical cases? We heard about Vauban, which is great, but also maybe some other cases in mind about child-friendly planning cities. And do you think they are also sustainable because they are child-friendly?
Right. Well, I hope I've answered that second question already and clearly. For me, if we ask ourselves what a sustainable neighborhood or a sustainable city looks like, it looks just like a child-friendly neighborhood. And again, Vauban is a really good example of that. But I was interested in my studies and in my visits. I visited about 12 or 15 cities. I was interested in not so much the cities that are already child-friendly, maybe by accident, but the cities that have taken this idea seriously, that have said there's something important here, not just about children, but about making the city work better for everyone. And I'll give two examples. Rotterdam is the first, and maybe I'll be interested to hear if Tobias thinks there's some links and parallels with Hamburg. But Rotterdam was a city that 15 years ago, families didn't want to live in Rotterdam. They wanted to leave Rotterdam if they could. And the city realized that this was a real problem, that the long-term future of the city was threatened if it couldn't attract and retain families. And that part of that meant really giving the built form of the city, its parks, its streets, its public spaces, a makeover. And it's probably spent more money and more effort into going through that process than any other city on earth. So there's a lot to learn from Rotterdam, and I write a whole chapter about it in my book. I think the other cities I'm looking at, actually, I don't write too much about them in my book, but I'm really interested in what's happening in Paris right now, and this move towards the sort of idea of a 15-minute neighborhood, and really tackling the dominance of the car in that city. And I think you can see the same things happening in Barcelona, amongst other cities. So those two cities, which are really grappling with car dominance, with some of the side effects of density, of challenges with heat, with problems of water and drainage, and the direction they're going is to join the dots between their work on mitigating the impact of the climate and of pollution, and making the city a better place for families to live and for children to grow up.
You're definitely talking about cities in transition, aren't you? So it's quite fascinating how fast actually they can develop if the decisions are made.
And I think just to say that these cities that I've talked about have realized that children can be a kind of lens, or you can strengthen the moral case, the ethical case for the changes that we all know cities are going to have to make anyway, by bringing them into the conversation.
Thank you, Tim.
And we're moving forward to Eira. So how did child-friendly design sound to you? Any thoughts on it?
Well, our ELY Centre, we are a governmental organization. We don't do the planning ourselves, but we give guidance and follow the land use planners' work in municipalities and elsewhere. We could do more with this child-friendliness aspect, but we are enhancing participation in different fields of planning, and also environmental education, because I think participation, communication, and environmental education are key parts of finding solutions that are okay with almost everybody, but and maybe giving strength to those who actually do the work, that those who shout the loudest are not always right, and always think also those who cannot shout very loud, like children, but also the biodiversity. The nature cannot shout.
Hey, and I'm going to describe what ELY Centre is, where Eira works. So the role of these centres for economic development, transport and the environment, also called ELY centres, here in Finland, is to implement the government's regional implementation and development tasks. And one of these tasks is to steer the planning of land use in municipalities. And before Tim, we were talking with Tobias about Hamburg's urban design and future plans. And let's ask the same kind of question to Lahti and the region. What are some of the challenges that we face here in Lahti when it comes to sustainable land use? And this is to you, Eira.
At the regional level, I think if I'm thinking of climate change now mainly, like the water, flooding, those kinds of issues, and planning of watershed protection and that kind of issues, it's like everyday work, so it's well in hand. But other issues like climate change adaptation overall is not in everyday practice. For example, we fund some initiatives in farming and rural areas, and those areas are very much affected by the climate change, like crop farming. And I think there is still a lot to do to remain or enhance the sustainability even when the climate changes. Yeah, Johanna maybe has more precise in the actual planning.
That could be a good discussion point, urban versus rural, when it comes to sustainable land use. So yeah, maybe we can dig deeper in that later on. And we will continue with you, Eira, together with Johanna very soon. But now we're moving to Johanna.
So Johanna, you work as the master planning architect in the city of Lahti. The city of Lahti has developed a very specific method of continuous master plan. Could you tell us a bit more about it, what it actually means?
Yes, thank you. Lahti direction is actually a process where we work continuously in cycles of 4 years by the city council terms. And whole the process actually starts from city strategy. And next step after the strategy is more detailed planning, which is made based on the strategy. And we do land use is planned in master plan, and sustainable mobility is planned in sustainable urban mobility plan. And also we have some other programs as environmental program and service network, which are actually related and can be updated during the same process. Our work's purpose has been to ensure a sustainable and healthy life for the citizens. And we also, in our process, we monitor and evaluate our solution from 3 different angles of sustainability: ecological, economical, and social sustainability. And this is very important so that we are to monitor our work, because otherwise we cannot know if we are going to right direction. But this is like the up level of the process.
Thank you, Johanna. It's quite an interesting process, because also a lot of like scientific knowledge, but it's also citizens' views that can be taken into account when doing continuous master planning. So we can have a dialogue ongoing with the citizens and also take their notes as a part of official planning. So that's pretty interesting. So now we're going to continue with Johanna and Eira together with you. And I will ask first to Eira. How was the region? How do you think the region was prepared for climate change in terms of land use? So do you see there? We discussed about this already, but to make it very brief, are we ready for climate change or not?
My point of view, not quite ready. We have different municipalities in our region. Some are advanced, like Lahti, but we have smaller towns and we have very small municipalities with only a few thousand inhabitants. So of course they don't have resources to look that so much in detail. Maybe the water, like I mentioned, water issues, flooding areas, those are mapped quite well. But we are starting a project in Häme with collecting more information about vulnerable areas and collecting that information from citizens, especially from smaller municipalities, because the municipal officers don't have time or resources to collect that kind of data. So we and this project, we can help to collect that information where we already know which parts of the municipality have already suffered some flood or drought or some other issues. Yes, I think the farming and forestry, and then also the healthcare sector, those should be better prepared.
Okay.
Thank you. It's so valuable that you support also smaller municipalities taking these actions, so that they would be more prepared for the future. Exactly.
And with Johanna before, we were discussing citizen participation a bit, this is quite often the planning processes and the ways we use land, they can spark quite strong emotions in people. So could you give us some examples or tell what are some of the hot topics that are under discussion in Lahti right now?
Yes, hot topics. I think I believe that our hot potato at the moment is traffic and traffic solutions, especially in city center, so that we can, like, the whole city center can be reachable on all ways of moving, but still that we can find more space for the greeneries and for sustainable mobilities. So that's maybe the biggest question, and it relates how we use money, where we want to use the money, and what are the best ways to actually increase the well-being of citizens. So that's maybe the biggest issue at the moment in Lahti.
But that's also one of the biggest transition processes that all cities globally are trying to make. So try to be strong with that.
Can I come in on that point? Because one of the other cities that I studied had a really interesting take on this, and this is the city of Oslo. And I guess again, people be familiar that Oslo and of course Norway are putting a lot of energy and effort into moving away from the car and promoting other transport uses, and the city centre of Oslo is becoming car-free. And so the project that I looked at in my book was called the Traffic Agent, and it was using children to kind of be spies on their local neighbourhood and tell the city where there were problems, where they faced problems getting around. So, you know, this road junction is dangerous and you need to do something about it. And it was an ambitious program using a smartphone with a dedicated team of officers within the municipality. And it was very much framed as a part of this move away from the car. And when I interviewed one of the civil servants, so the federal civil servants in Oslo, she was saying how the politicians have realized that a child-friendly city means getting away from the car. So you have to move away from car dominance if you want to be more child-friendly. And so thinking about children and giving children a voice and bringing a focus on their lives helps to sweeten the pill. This is the term that she used. It sweetens the pill of moving away from car domination. And I think that's a really valuable lesson for other cities.
Definitely, I agree. We also got some audience from Norway. So in case you have something in mind there watching this, you can also join us and ask also questions from the experts. Please do it. Tobias, when listening all these speeches, what came to your mind? Can we still share something between green capitals or you know, have ongoing discussion about land use as well, or what do you think?
Yeah, but I think the discussion is just right. I think that the issue of traffic and mobility change and how to balance the relationship between the space you might free up if you have a car lane less in the city because your mobility from cars might be going down, even though we're not quite realizing that here yet. But if let's assume you wanted to have public transport lanes priority perhaps, or you want to plant more trees, you want to have sustainable urban drainage, you want to have people open up their front gardens to integrate more just sponge in terms of reacting and adapting to climate change. I think that is one of the key challenges we have, because we want to have all of these things, but we need to balance them out. Someone needs to decide, and there's always this prioritization process. So that's one thing that occurred to me. And the other issue that we haven't perhaps touched on, and I haven't mentioned yet, is that we are obviously needing to adapt our building stock, and we are in Hamburg looking at every block, every house at the moment in terms of its CO2 ratio and in terms of how to adapt it. And that's a major task, really. And we're trying to figure out which buildings perhaps are worth more adapting than others. Which buildings are already okay. What do we do with historic structures of our city? We don't want to plaster everything in insulation. Do we actually do this by insulating, or do we adapt the technology? I think we're all asking ourselves the same question. Question is, as an urban planner, what does that mean for me now when I plan the city of the future? What will it look like? So that's an interesting one. Just one point, I suppose, on the child-friendly city. I think we are, again, Tim, we are all on your side with the idea that perhaps the ideal climate-friendly city is also the ideal child-friendly city, and we should explore that more, because I think child-friendly city in play is not in Hamburg, is not always at the forefront. We've done the sort of strategies, we have the playgrounds, but I think we can be a lot more imaginative when it comes to how to let the city be playable space and how to push the car away and into its place. We are not, I can openly confess that Hamburg has still got a lot of traffic going through the center. We have the city literally divided in half by a 6-lane motorway, and there's not much we can do about it because we're freeing the city from car traffic in other places, so it all goes on the Trunks Road, and then so I think we've got a long way to go together to explore these topics.
Thanks, Tobias.
Valuable points.
Yeah, Tim, how would you help a city to start the transition process, thinking about child friendliness? What kind of things one should think first?
I think it's like any new initiative. You want to find out what the best cities are doing elsewhere and what lessons and insights they have for your city. You want to try some pilots, maybe start with some small scale or some easy wins or some experiments. And I think it's particularly valuable to do some projects that really have an impact, that make people think differently about their neighborhoods. And so what one initiative I'm interested in is it's not really a transport or planning initiative, it's temporary street closures. So you're not making any physical changes to the street or the neighborhood, but you are using municipal powers to stop traffic, maybe for 2 hours a day or 2 hours a week, or maybe for a week in the summer holidays, and to demonstrate to people what it's like to have some, to live in a neighborhood that's not so oriented towards the car. And I think those temporary and experimental projects can be really helpful, especially if, of course, you get some good data and evaluation, and you also make that link with what children who we routinely ignore in city planning, even though they are 15, 20, 25% of the population, with what they're saying about their neighborhood. So there is many ideas in my book. Of course, people can buy my book as well, but those I think are a couple of ideas that I'd like to promote.
And then also communicate, share this kind of expertise about this. How does that sound to you, Johanna? Could we do something like this also here in Lahti?
Yes, I think we have pretty much data about from the citizen. Part of the data is actually from children also. So we have collected quite much, and we have really nice maps showing where we have the biggest problems, which part of the, for example, city center are the best parts and which are the most quiet and most pleasant places in the city center. So I hope that we can go further with planning and those quick, those experimenting, like little project in the city center sounds really good starting point. And we actually do already we have some changes and we are trying how they work. And I hope that we can have more, especially in terms of new green areas and greeneries and like the more places to sit down and have a good time in the city center. So hopefully we get for that.
Yeah,
sounds very good.
Too. Yeah. Would you like to, Eira, still add something about the climate change adaptation work and also maybe the challenges that Hamburg and all the other cities are facing also with the built environment?
Well, I think in Finland we have the strategies, we have the programs, we have the plans. Now we only need to do it. This mitigation and adaptation, they need a change of thinking, and that might be the challenge right now. Because I think in Finland we have the carbon neutrality targets and we have regional targets and municipal targets. And adaptation, some parts are already thought in everyday use. But if there is some kind of silver bullet, how to just do it, then that would be fine, because it's a change. But as I always say, like, people remain the same, but just ways to do things, they might change, like the energy we use in our vehicles, that might change. We have ELY centers, we have this transport funds also, but and also for sustainable mobility and building bicycle lanes, but those funds are so little that's not doing it, not very fast at least.
I think with adaptation we learn by doing. Like with the stormwater management, we've done quite a big projects here within the last 5 years or so and learned so much about it. And also I think many of these areas are quite pleasant, quite child-friendly areas, because they might be future playgrounds as well. But the point is that we need to do concrete actions, because otherwise we cannot really learn to also make mistakes, but also learn for the future.
Totally, and these small practical experiences can be really eye-opening for the people. So it's very good. Hey, do our panelists have anything else to discuss? Maybe there was something in the last two speakers that Tobias and Tim can hold on, or should we go the next round? Oh, Tobias, yes.
No, I was just interested in Eira saying that you've got the strategy and the plans, and it makes it sound so easy. Of course, the main issue, I suppose, is how to fund the implementation of all of these ideas that we have, and to develop that green economy that supports the job growth at the same time. And we haven't really touched much on that. I wondered whether there is certain, I know we all have certain funds, but I presume we all know they don't really stretch to doing the full whack of the things that we want to do. So how do you prioritize in Lahti would be my question, and where do you start?
Well, in our ELY center, we have all kinds of programs and funds. and we are turning them now into circular economy mode, but also thinking that do no significant harm. So we don't want to fund, on the other hand, some fossil fuel things, and on other hand, get sustainable mobility projects or biogas or some that kind of projects. So that is ongoing, but we have like the background, we have the national strategy as our background. So it is changing, and of course, like these funds, they don't solve everything, but everybody and companies and everybody has to do the change.
Good. Thank you, Eira. And did I hear some talking? I think we're very quick, Tobias.
I've got one more question, this time to Tim. Because you're talking about temporary projects, and we really like those as well, that experimenting. We've just closed a few months ago more roads, and we're trying to measure and evaluate what that means for pedestrian movement and walking and quality of life and health and well-being. But do you have particular projects that you suggest, which you've seen in your research, that work extremely well to give these children, to put the children first in terms of the priority? Perhaps apart from Freiburg, which...
Yeah. I think if you're looking at some of these temporary projects, one that seems to capture people's imagination and get a lot of support is what we call a school street project. So the focus is on the streets that are outside of schools, and especially the school entrances, and stopping cars from coming within 100, 200 meters or whatever of those entrances every school day, at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And there are different models in different parts of the world. I know it's something I saw in Flanders. It's something that is taking off here in England, and I think it's very dramatic in its impact on, firstly, on travel modes. So we know that far more children walk and cycle to school when you make that change. So the parents aren't just carrying on driving but stopping further away. They are, with their children, changing the way they travel. But it also has quick and measurable impact on the feeling, the ambience outside the school, on the pollution levels, and of course it has that kind of moral case to it as well. We are doing this to keep our children safer, healthier, to tackle this big problem of air pollution. So I think it has a lot of, you could say, propaganda power, I think, and I know that there are many cities that are looking at the school streets model in different ways, and of course you can also adapt it to be more permanent. You can build in road filters and reclaim some of the street space outside the school. So there's a natural journey, a pathway to getting beyond just a program and into the physical changes that we're going to need.
Great.
Thank you, Tim. Sara, should we go to the last round of myths, or?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yes, we'll do it very quickly. So we have a last round, which is about myths, claims, and misconceptions related to sustainable land use. Very interesting. So you may agree or disagree. Just give us a 1 or 2 sentence reasoning why you think so. Or
very short.
Very short. Yes. We have some more videos coming up. So yes, the first myth goes to Tobias. Urban design is only about densifying.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's true. I think it's not about just densifying. I think, as I said at the beginning, we're not looking to have skyscrapers everywhere. People sometimes ask me that. So is that what you're trying to do to accommodate growth? Just build 10-story buildings either side of these large roads. No, it's not. We are looking at all the other levels and facets of planning, lively ground floors, good green infrastructure, people movement, child play, and all of these things. That's all part and more important than the density. And density is always a question how you measure it. I think if you stick to the good old model of blocks and fronts and backs and good courtyards and green moves and all of these things, you can accommodate a lot of people and families more so, which is one of the key arguments I think that we all share. We want families back in the dense city urban blocks. Thanks.
Very good.
Thank you, Tobias. Tim, public playgrounds are enough for children to play in cities?
Yes, that is a very damaging myth, and playgrounds were only really invented as a way of kind of reconciling children's need for space to play with the growth of the car. And we now realize that that's getting the balance wrong. It's giving too much power to the car. And so that's why places like Vauban and many of the other cities I'm talking about, where Vauban doesn't really have any playgrounds. All of the public space is available for play. And that's definitely the lighthouse and the direction of travel that I'm arguing for.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. And Eira, cities are more efficient and sustainable living areas compared to the countryside.
Well, that would be mainly false. And I say that way because urban lifestyle is, at least in Finland, we have studied, urban lifestyle is consuming more goods, consuming and traveling more, as urban or rural inhabitants still have a little bit more modest lifestyle, and also the neighborhood help is still existing.
Thank you, Eira.
Johanna, what do you think? People should have more say about their surroundings.
Yes, from my point of view, it's critical to take citizens into discussion in city planning. They are experts who know extremely well all the everyday surroundings. Most important thing is to start the public discussion on early stage of planning project, so that we can really have time and possibility to edit the plans on the base of given feedback. I must say that we actually do that very well here in Lahti. But two more things. It's also very important to understand during the process that we cannot accomplish every different opinion in our plans. And that's why it's very important to have a public discussion about the aims and the restrictions which are relating to our planning processes, so that it's easier to accept the final decision, why it's made. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a strong message, Johanna.
Thank you, Johanna. And do you know what? This was the last episode of European Dialogue for Sustainable Cities. It's been, this started in February this year. This was the 9th episode. So far we've had 38 experts from 13 different countries. What a journey. So we have prepared a small video to take us down a memory lane. So we're going to watch a small video.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth episode of the European Dialogue for Sustainable Cities. In this dialogue series, we want to highlight solutions that other cities could use in their daily development.
So this is an example of a street in Tel Aviv. Hey, let's make this place also a fun place. Show people, okay, you get rid of the cars, but there is something else to do.
We can see the vision 5-10 years down the line, but what does that mean on a day-to-day basis for, the people who may already be most at risk and the voices we don't necessarily hear?
If residents start to see these small changes that I'm giving data, it's changing the way in my daily life of how I'm living and working and experiencing the city.
So this is it. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Saara. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to this amazing team here behind us, and also Konsta there behind computer from Lab University of Applied Sciences and StartHub. And thank you to all of our expert speakers. Thank you to our viewers throughout this year. It's been a pleasure. And the European Green Capital year here in Lahti, it's nearing its end, but the discussion, it won't end here.
Yeah, this year has been a lot about sharing. In despite of this weird COVID times that we are living, actually we've had a possibility to share solutions and concrete things between the cities, and I think that's really important that cities are having these discussions ongoing. I hope this has been inspiring and also thoughtful to all of you. So this was the European Dialogue for Sustainable Cities, and yeah, we're happy about this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.